This meeting is being recorded.
It's funny. I heard that back on yours right there. And Jennifer, it's lovely to meet you. And so funny. Right before we got on, you're like, I'm creating a birth plan. I'm like, wait a minute. Let's just jump right in. What are we talking about here? Like,
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
of course. Tell me about this birth plan. Like, what's
Yeah, so I am 30 weeks pregnant,
congratulations.
and thank you. And it's my first go around on this, and I actually have on Saturday we have a our first prenatal class, which is about labor and delivery. So I'm sure I'll be sufficiently traumatized by then. And so, yeah, I was researching what happens
Mhm.
so that I could write down questions, but then also start writing down my preferences to see if, the hospital we're having it at is kind of aligned
Mhm.
with what we want. So, yeah, learning way more than I probably want to, but that I need to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't know me, but my wife has been a labor and delivery nurse for like 20 something years. So if you have any
Yeah.
questions, just bring them this way, and the Parkers will tell you all about it.
Um, Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think the whole thing, like throughout the whole pregnancy, as well as, now that I'm kind of focused on what happens at delivery, but also, the more important part, like the after part.
Of course.
Um, I think what I have just found really fascinating is just the whole physical and mental change throughout pregnancy and then motherhood. And I think it's so fascinating that really, once you start digging in, like we all know, obviously your body creates a human being, but
Mhm.
when, you're looking through I have like 2 apps that I follow. I have, the typical what to expect book that I've been
Yeah.
reading, like things like that. But when you actually start reading through it and seeing week by week what is actually happening, um, it's pretty amazing, and I find it just fascinating. So I
Yeah.
think, a little bit is true for labor and delivery too. Like you don't realize it's that complicated until you, actually read through all the process and all the
Mhm.
options and, decisions you have to make. Because I think originally I was like, well, I'm not going to do a birth plan. Like my birth plan is healthy baby, healthy
Yeah.
mom, like whatever it takes,
Yeah.
which it's still at the end of the day, that's, obviously the main goal. And this could all go out the window if something needs to happen. But I didn't realize how many just decisions that you should
Mhm.
think about ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny and then you can read all these things and do all these things. I have a almost 11-year-old daughter, and the actual
Mm,
parenting part is just like it's never what you think it is. It's
right.
never. It's
Yeah. I
always
know.
changing.
I had my baby shower this past weekend, and within it, one of the games we play, because normally, like, I hate baby showers. I think they're so
Mhm.
boring. They are. Like when I've gone to I'm 40 years old, so I've been to a lot of baby showers,
Mhm.
and that was like my least favorite thing to do out of the shower situation.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, if we're gonna do games, let's at least do something kind of like fun. Like I don't want to be smelling diapers with like chocolate in it. I don't want to be
Oh,
trying baby food. Like
no.
I hate those games.
Weird.
So we did like a top 10 things that I like about being pregnant, and then like top 10 things that I dislike about being pregnant. And one of my very high on the list things I dislike are like these parental horror stories
Ah, yeah.
that, as a first time parent, you get a lot of that. Like people are like, "Oh, it's your first time. Let me tell you how bad it's going to be." And you're like, eh, I like to say like the first time parent is the only time you really have that like period of ignorant bliss.
Mhm.
But like just let us have that. Just let us have
Let
that
us
like
have
a
it.
little longer, right?
Uh,
Because also you could sit here for the next hour and tell me about all the challenges and tribulations that you guys faced as first time
sure.
parents. And the thing is that I won't get it. I
Yeah.
won't get it. Like, I've
Yeah.
never been through it. It's gonna go
Of
over my
course.
head. So, like, why bother? And instead, just let me, focus on, like, the exciting part of it
Yeah.
and the scary part of it.
Sure.
But
Yeah. I love this. I like how you've thought this through, Jennifer. You've really thought about it. Yeah, the honesty is very good. It's very good.
well, I only plan on doing this once, so I feel like,
Yeah.
let's
We're in
learn
the
as
same
much as we
boat.
can.
We're in the same boat.
Yeah.
I'm an only time parent. There's one time only time parent.
Yes. Okay, and how many people, when you said that, how many times have then said, "You're gonna want more, you're gonna change your mind, trust me."
Well, I mean, yes, that's very true. Uh, I feel like my experience was like people were like not happy that we weren't having another. Like it was like offensive to them. It's like,
Right, like, how
oh,
could you just stop at
how could
once?
you? They need a brother or sister or something. I was like, why don't you just mind your own business? I'm like, if you want to have 10 kids, have at it. Like, but
Yeah,
don't worry about my situation.
yeah,
Like,
oh my god, yeah, I hate that. I've gotten probably that comment more than anything else, where I'll
yeah,
be they always ask, "Are you a first time? Is this your
yeah,
first?" Which is fair. And I always say, which even that question is interesting because in a way it almost signifies there will be more,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
not, but it's like, so is this your first? And I'll say yes. And then I usually say, and only.
yeah.
And immediately, like people just can't leave it at that. They
It's
just,
crazy.
like, they can't. They have to submit their opinion. And it doesn't matter who it is, like family,
Yeah,
random people, like the cashier at the grocery store, like, it doesn't
yeah,
matter. Everyone believes that you can't just have one. Like there's no way you're going to change your mind, or to your point, like they need more. And you're like, first of all, in this day and age, how do you afford like
I
two,
know.
three, four, five? Like this isn't like our parents where
Mm,
like my dad had 8 brothers and sisters.
yeah,
There is no way you could afford 9 kids right now, like, in
no.
this society. Like, I'm looking at 3,000 a month for daycare. Like,
Yeah. Oh
times
my
that by
God.
9. Well, yeah. I live in Chicago,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
it's
I'm sorry.
it's a lot.
My reaction was like, whoa.
No, that's how I was too. I was like,
Yeah,
"I'm
yeah.
sorry." And are they getting, like, a private chef that's going to be, like,
Seriously.
creating the meals for them? Yeah, it's insane. Like, we found one that was, like, a deal at, like, 2,400 a month.
Oh, a deal. Yeah.
And yeah, and you're like, "For a newborn, like,
Mm.
what are you doing?" Like,
Yeah.
I wish someone would pay me $2,400 a month to, like, change diapers and watch them sleep. Um but yeah, it's like times that by 2, 3, 4, like, it's just
It
unrealistic, you
is.
know?
It is.
Um, and then let alone just, I am 40, so realistically, we were so blessed, like, this one has been very uneventful.
Yeah.
There's been no complications, there's been no issues. It only took us, like, 6 months to get pregnant. Like,
Yeah.
this has been this knock on, I hope this is wood next to
Yeah,
me.
maybe not.
It's it's been, pretty easy,
Sure.
um, in the grand scheme of things. And I'm like, I feel like in this weird way, if I try to have another, which I would never do right away because I mean, girl needs a break in
Mm,
between,
right.
right? Like, not trying to be pregnant for 2 years straight. Um, so it's like wait a couple years to like toddler so you don't have 2 newborns.
Hmm.
Okay, so now we're looking at like 42, 43 trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's at that point you're almost like testing fate, and I'm almost asking for like hardships
Mm,
that I don't wanna have to go through,
yeah. Yeah.
that I'm just like, no. So I hate that pressure
Yeah.
for a second kid because 'cause you're like, we don't even know if that's possible, and, like, there's just a
Yeah.
lot of pressure to have kids in general in our society, I think is just, it's a hard path
Yeah. It's
because
unbelievable.
so many people, not just women, but like men, with, I mean, they contribute to having a kid too, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many things that have to go right for a baby to actually be born,
Yes.
that are completely out of your control, that it's like putting pressure on anyone to have a kid is just so unfair
I think it's
because
insane, actually. It's
yeah, it's
ridiculous.
it's like
It's not like
yeah,
eating chips, so you can't just have one. I mean, it's like
right.
it's not Doritos here. I mean, what is this
Yeah,
like?
no, it's like we're just so thankful we're having one. I'm
Yeah.
like, the day we told my parents that we were having one, because they've been bugging me for at least 11 years to have a child.
They're bugging you.
So when we told my dad, he was like, and we knew it was a girl right away because I'm older and they do the testing, right away. Um, so we said, we're having a daughter, and he was like, "Oh, so for the first you can try, or for the second one, maybe you can try for a boy." And I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna set expectations.
Yeah.
We're I'm like, I'm only 10 weeks pregnant right now. We're gonna set
Yeah.
expectations. There won't be a second. Also, no such thing as trying for a boy. Like you don't get to pick." Um,
I
you
love the
know,
realism here.
like, I'm
Straight
just like,
shooter.
no. Yeah. Yeah, especially when it comes to this. I'm like, no. Like to your point, why
Yeah.
don't you mind your business?
Mind your business. Yeah.
Um,
Like they
and
wouldn't want
now
you interfering in their life about it.
no, oh,
They wouldn't
absolutely
want
not.
that.
They don't want my opinion. They
Yeah,
don't want me
exactly.
interfering. So I'm like, let's goes both ways here.
Yeah, it works both
Uh,
ways.
yeah. And now the big question is what's the name?
Oh, I
And
see.
it is intense line of questioning.
Intense. Is an interrogation here? I mean, what is this like?
There is like all four grandparents are asking, great grandma's asking,
Yeah.
like uh they really were pressuring to do it in time for the baby shower. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no. And they think we are just lying and we have it and we're not saying anything. I'm like, no, no, we really don't. Like,
Yeah.
there's no secret lists or anything. Like, we
Right.
really don't know yet.
Yeah. This is
And that's
refreshing.
okay.
It's very refreshing. You're like a very straight to the point person, which I love. I feel like
Yeah.
you're probably like this in a lot of things. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know, but like, and I think that's kind of what resonated with me when I reached out about kind of the midlife aspect you're talking about. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is going to be an honest conversation about midlife, not some
Yeah.
bullshit deal. Like, it's like I want the reality. I'm 44, and
Mhm.
I've had these conversations with other people, and I think they're interesting.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
yeah, so I'd
absolutely.
love to hear kind of your arc into thinking about midlife and how things have changed for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I recently released a book, and I started a podcast back in 2021 called like My Almost Midlife Crisis. And that was truly because, during the pandemic, it kind of started back in 2020. And I'm sure like a lot of people, to be honest, no matter what your age was, um, during the pandemic, I think a lot of us, it was like this time of reevaluation and really thinking about our lives and what was important to us, and also just a greater sense of mortality, right? I mean, when you're 21, for example, and you just think you're going to live forever, and nothing's ever going to hurt you. It's very different when you're in your mid to upper 30s, you're closing in on 40s, you're in your 40s or your 50s, where that that's not the case. And that actually time is precious and limited, right? There's like a switch there.
Yep.
Well, COVID in a way almost forced us all to really come to terms with that a lot quicker, and like at a mass scale. And so I was one of those people. I've been in advertising for about 18 years, and I was like starting to just really struggle with like motivating myself, and like this career I've had passion for so long. I was like, just questioning if that's how I wanted to spend the second half of my life. And then we were pushing back our wedding like multiple times, which then pushed back family planning multiple times. And there was like all these things at the same time. And I remember one day I was sitting on our couch and I turned to my now husband and I was like, I feel like I'm almost going through a midlife crisis. And that was really like the impetus of it, because then I started kind of looking up, what is a midlife crisis? And it's funny because like a midlife crisis, it sounds so negative. Like it just sounds, you automatically think of like going out and buying some sports car you can't
Yeah.
afford, or like cheating on your spouse with someone like half your age, right? Like these really like disruptive and in a lot of cases destructive behaviors. And so I think people in general, no matter what they're going through, like they don't want to call it a midlife crisis because like they don't want it, that like label has a lot of baggage. But what I really found was that all a really midlife crisis is this desire for to make a change in some or multiple aspects of your life, right? And that could happen more than once in your life. It can happen earlier than midlife. It can happen later. But the reason why it's so common at midlife is because that increased sense of mortality, right? So when then I started looking into that and I was like, well, that's exactly how I feel, because I feel like, do I want to change my career? Or like we're looking to change our lives in terms of having a kid, like all of these things. Um, and I was like, yeah, I think I kind of am. I think I kind of am going through that. And then fast forward, we got married, we got pregnant. And then when I was 13 weeks pregnant, I was actually laid off from my job. Not related. I feel like everyone wants me to like sue the company. It's not related.
Right.
Um,
Everybody. Here comes everybody again. Do
literally,
this.
like anytime I've mentioned it, people are like, "Ooh, like that's a lawsuit." And I'm like, "No, you know what? Not everything is a lawsuit. This has nothing to do with that."
Right.
Um, but I was laid off, and it was literally at that moment that I was like, I don't know what's next. Like I could have just went and got another job at an agency in advertising. That no problem. There's plenty of jobs available, and I absolutely could have done that. But I was like, something was just telling me that no, like that's actually not what you want, and you can, but like should you? And then I kind of joked that, okay, now I'm not almost in a midlife crisis. Now I am, because I
Mm.
just literally don't know what to do. Um, and I truly believe that the difference between the midlife crisis we hear about and maybe like a good midlife crisis is taking time to self-reflect and actually understand what's driving that yearning for change before you make an action, right? And if you can do that, which is the hard part, but if you can do that, then I truly believe that it can be this really positive opportunity and time in your life that you can make really good changes that are going
Yeah.
to help you have an even better experience in the second half.
Yeah. So, I mean, should it be called a crisis?
Yeah, I don't, probably not. And honestly, like the label, like who cares? Like who That's why I'm like, people don't have to call it a midlife crisis at
Yeah.
all. Call it whatever you want. Like,
Yeah.
or don't call it anything. But it's basically like if you're feeling bored, if you're like bored with your life, like you're
Yeah.
feeling like I need to make a change, there's like this internal like antsiness and like
Mm-hmm.
anxiousness that like something needs to happen,
Sure.
like then that's all it is. Like, and it's fine. You can call it anything.
Let's give
You
it a
just
sports
call it turning
analogy.
40.
Just say like you're doing adjustments at halftime or something.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
you went
Exactly.
into the
Like
locker room and you're like,
it's the
Coach, we got to
halftime
change this.
show.
Yeah.
We got some time before third quarter, like you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Exactly. It's like, oh, I hope the halftime show is good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, so it's like it probably shouldn't be called
Yeah.
crisis, and I think that really at the end of the day, like with anything, I think the more that we talk about it, the
Yeah.
more it becomes destigmatized
Of course.
and people can just like chill out and realize this is super normal and
Yeah.
like give yourself some grace while you figure it out.
All right. Here's a deeper question, Jennifer.
Okay,
We're going to go deep here.
let's go
Would
deep.
the 20-year-old, what would the 20-year-old Jennifer think of the 40-year-old Jennifer?
Yeah, I think she would be proud. The 20-year-old Jennifer was like, especially now as I'm about to become a mom, I'm like, "Oh my god, could you imagine if I was doing this at 2021? Like, I'd be a mess." I think, the 20-year-old Jennifer, I think was uh, it's interesting because I think she also was a little lost because when I graduated college, I wanted to be the next Howard Stern. That was like that I
Hmm.
feel like that dates me in and of itself. Like, who wants to be Howard Stern anymore? Um, but like at the time I was like, that just seems like the best job ever. Like he just gets to say what he wants. He gets to fly all over the world, like be in movies, like do all this stuff, interview people, and like just say whatever's on his mind and like get paid for it. That sounds
Yeah.
great. Um, and then that didn't work out. So then I went into advertising um and I went all in. I mean, I went all in. That was like my whole identity, right? Like I worked my ass off and I quote unquote paid my dues and for years. And I think, I've just learned so much since then, which I think is the benefit of just growing up. And the good side of aging is I think now at this point in my life, I'm um much more into like self-care, much more into putting myself first in really every situation. And that is something that I wish I probably would have learned much earlier in life. But I think the 20-year-old me would be thankful that I at least still have half of my life where I am practicing that.
Yeah. I think it's just a good reflective question. It's like we're always like moving forward or thinking the future of what's happening now, but
Mhm.
what about, kind of these different versions of ourselves that have existed?
Yeah.
And as
Yeah,
you get deeper
absolutely.
into it.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest lessons, like during COVID, like one of the biggest pivotal points on that self-care spectrum was, my whole life I had prided myself in, I would always say, like, no one's harder on me than me,
Hmm.
right? Like, no one is harder. I'm hardest on myself. And what I was trying to say my whole life on that was that I've always really held myself accountable and I don't really let myself like slack off. Like I always have some goals I'm working towards, etc. Or I'm also a pretty self-reflective person. So if I respond to a situation in a way that I didn't, I'm like the first one to be like, you know what, I screwed up. Like
Yeah.
and I will catch it usually before someone has to tell me. Or if I don't, I'm not the person that's like, no, I didn't. Like that wasn't me. Like I'll
Yeah.
automatically be like, oh shit, I didn't.
Yeah.
That is not what I meant.
Yeah.
So I think, but I always had this thing like I'm hard on myself and like you will never be harder on me than me. And during COVID, and I was like, well, that's stupid. Like, why is that a good thing?
Uh-huh.
Right? Because who am I expecting to be easier on me than me? Right? Like you can still hold goals, you can still be ambitious, you can still hold yourself accountable and you should. But you also if like you're not willing to give yourself grace, then why would anyone else?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that was really kind of the big turning point for me where I was like this motto that I had in my head for most of my life is not serving me, right? Especially in this moment where we're under so much stress and whatever. And I kept telling myself, like, it could be worse, right? Like, your family's healthy, you have a job. Like, when everything was like really going, down the tube
Yeah.
there in 2020, I like felt I had this like massive amount of guilt that like I was like kind of depressed, or I was kind of just like struggling in general. And I didn't feel like I had a right to,
Hmm.
because I still had my job. I didn't have to worry about, how to pay the bills. I didn't have to worry about um, an autoimmune disease that if I get COVID, it could kill me, right? Like, there were like so many things that I didn't have to worry about, that I saw, in all the reports, and just with friends or whatever, that other people had to worry about. So me feeling bad at the time, I just felt guilty for doing so, because I was like, what, like, I felt like I didn't have the right to.
Hmm.
And, you know, I think that really led to that, where I was just like, well, hold on. Like, that's not fair either. Right? Like, I mean, as long as you have perspective that it can be worse, it doesn't mean that you can't have like feel what you're feeling, and you can't, need your own kind of care in order to get yourself out of that. It really was, I think, a much needed lesson. And honestly, I think it couldn't have come at a perfect time if I'm about to become a mother, because God knows mothers need to give themselves so much grace
Yes.
and not be hard on themselves. And I can't even imagine if I was still in the old mindset and then trying to be a first time mom. Like, no way.
Yeah. So how has this shift in mindset affected kind of your daily interaction with other people?
Yeah, well, I would say quite a bit, because now that so I didn't rush back to work. I'm not working right now, which is extremely uncomfortable for me, because I've been working since I was 15 years old. So, like, the whole idea of not having a job is really weird.
Yeah.
So I'm not working. I'll go back after, I have the baby. I'm not doing I respect stay-at-home moms so much, but that's not me.
My
I
wife
can't
said the
do that.
same thing. She's like, I'm not that person. It's
I'm
not
just
me.
not. Yeah, like,
Yeah, it's
I'm
okay.
not.
It's okay.
Yeah, you like, it's great if you can. And you know what? As a woman, it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If
Right.
you stay at home, people are like, you're lazy, it's a vacation, whatever. If you go back to work, you're selfish. Like, so whatever,
Right.
just do what works for you.
Yeah.
But um I'm not gonna be a stay-at-home mom, but I was like, I'm also not gonna start a brand new job. I am at a higher level at work right now, so in my career. So I'm like, I'm not starting a new job when I'm in like my second trimester and I don't know, like, that's just disruptive. It's legally I can, but it's
Yeah.
disruptive for like how I work, that I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I'm just gonna wait. And in the meantime, at first I really struggled with that decision to wait. Like, I was like looking for like part-time roles, and my husband was like, "Are you doing this because you want to and because you're bored, or are you doing this because you feel like you have to?" And he's like, "I just like, why are you applying for this stuff?"
Right.
And I was like, "I don't know." I'm like, I part of it was I felt guilty for putting the added financial pressure on him. I also felt guilty for like having free time, right? Like, as an elder millennial, we're like, it's like our worth is based on our productivity. And like, I literally felt guilty for having a day where I was like, I'm not going to do anything today.
Yeah.
Um and so I had to kind of really get over that hump first. But now, um I'm getting a lot closer now. All of a sudden I have a lot more to do, but I'm working with like a career coach. I'm still keeping myself somewhat busy. I'm working with a career coach. I'm doing my podcasts. But in terms of relationships with people, I think the thing that I noticed the most, this is the first time I haven't worked. I also feel like I'm, going through kind of none of my friends are pregnant. And in fact, none of my friends in Chicago even have kids.
Mm.
So it got to the point at the end of the second trimester where I did start getting a little depressed and like a little feeling of isolation. Because I just felt like no one, like I didn't have a community that understood what I was going through. And I think that that was kind of a big lesson. Like I have great friends and I love them and they're not, they're very supportive even though they don't have kids, but I realized that that's actually not enough. Like it's actually really important to have a community that truly is going through what you're going through in order to kind of evade that self isolation that happens. Um and so I think I've been just really conscious over the last couple, I don't know, what am I, 7 months pregnant? Yeah. So, last like 4 months, I've been a lot more conscious on what do I need, mentally, uh, to just stay in a positive place, and what does that mean for my relationships? And in some cases, that means pulling back,
Mm.
from relationships that do not leave me in a positive mental place. And in some places, that means maybe asking, like actually asking for what I need, which is sometimes also really difficult. And then in other places, really just, or maybe I should say all places, setting boundaries, right?
Yes.
Um, which is also difficult sometimes. So it's just a lot of, again, prioritizing like, what do I need so that I can show up and be the best for those around me, but also sometimes that means I need to take a break and I actually can't be what you need right now, right? And that's okay too.
Have have other people told you about this shift in your mentality or have expressed their ideas about it or thoughts related to it?
No, it was definitely something I kind of started noticing in myself. And
Mm.
my husband and I have talked about it, especially over the last couple of years, like as we were, it really started coming up more as we were wedding planning through
Mhm.
COVID. And, we had to cut our list down quite a bit.
Mhm.
And as we were making those changes, the conversation came up a lot. And he's much better at boundary setting than I am. Um, so it came up a lot of like, if you don't really want this person, then don't have them. Like, and it sounds so easy, but
Right.
like it, when it's like family and not like, my immediate family, but
Sure.
especially like the extended family, like we had a Christmas party in December and it was with like the only, I said it was like a Facebook invite because my family like still plans everything on Facebook. And um like the only people going were aunts and uncles that I have really had no desire to see.
Yeah.
And I was like, because they just bring like toxicity. And I was like, "Ugh," like I want to see my brother because my brother's hosting it, but I don't really want to see anyone else that's there.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, "So don't go." And I was like, "What?" Like I was like, "I can't just not go to the family Christmas party. Like I can't just not." And he was like, "If you're not going to enjoy going, like just respond no." And so I did. I responded no,
Yeah.
and then my brother asked why I wasn't going. And like I so wanted to like make up a bullshit excuse, right? Like
Mhm.
I so wanted to make up like, oh, well, we had another party or like we were gonna be out of town or like whatever it is. But then I was like, no, you know what? Fuck it. Right. I was
Yeah.
like, you know what, Dave? I'm like, I'm not coming because I don't want to see Uncle
Yeah.
blank and Aunt blank. Like, because I have no desire. I have no desire to sit with them for the night. And I was like, but I would love to see you and the kids and would love to plan a different night for us to hang out together. And I was like, whew, that felt
That was
really good.
good. It got good to
Like,
Jennifer.
like afterwards, I was like, yes, like that felt great. And so then I think it's like just the more you do it, I guess, then yeah, it
Yeah.
starts getting like a little easier. Um, but yeah, sometimes like the mental part is so much harder than the physical part, right? It,
Yes.
it really is.
Yes.
And I'm learning a lot. I feel like while I've been, so I have like pregnancy hiccups, so they're
It's
just
okay. It's
driving me
all good.
crazy. um, so I feel like the last couple months, it's just been really me taking time just to like learn about myself and learn about that mental aspect. Um, including things like I recently learned about like matrescence,
Hmm.
which is this uh it's literally the mental shift from being a non-mother to a mother
Mm-hmm.
that is equivalent in its extent to adolescence because it's hormonal, physical, and mental. And, as I was reading all of these books about physically what happens, and I was feeling this isolation and kind of this, shift mentally, it really got me thinking like what everyone talks about when you become a mother and, you're going to be tired and you're going to be breastfeeding and you're going to like, do all these things. But I'm like, but none of it really talks about like the actual mental shift of adding that title of mother and like what does that do?
Yeah.
And so I kind of came across this matrescence, which is the shift of identity. It's basically like an identity crisis. Um and then it lasts for like the first year, like from pregnancy through the first year of having a child. And it's like stuff like that I just find absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And to be honest, things that I think our society, the other thing that I'm learning is like when you have a kid, when you're pregnant, it's all about you, right? Which is great. But then the second you have the kid, it's like, who cares? Like it's about the kid. And you need to focus on the kid and just need to like suck it up or whatever and like be a good mom. And that means being a good mom means like forgetting about yourself and focusing on the child. And I think like as I've been going through this, I've been using my new boundary setting skills and
Yeah.
I've been using like all of these things to really be like, no, you know what? Like postpartum is not just learning how to take care of child, it's also learning how to take care of me in that
Yeah.
moment and being very vocal in what I need and mentally, physically, everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the mental part is the hardest part, but I also think it's just like the most fascinating.
It is the most fascinating. And funny enough, like people care less about your kids the older they get, believe me. They're like, once they start
Yeah,
becoming like humans, regular humans are
right.
like, oh, anyways, you're starting to
But
behave
I
like
I
normal.
also just think that my husband and I were just talking about that the other day. We were like, I'm just so excited to see her like develop,
Yeah.
right? Like when they come out, they know nothing. They know nothing.
Hmm.
Like they can't even see fully. You can't they're like not even fully formed
Hmm.
really compared to like when a giraffe gives birth and the giraffe
Right.
runs away like 10
Hmm.
minutes
The
later.
horse. Yeah.
They can't do anything. Um they can't even see color yet. And it's like you come out of this body into this like where every single sound and taste and what you hear and everything is brand new at all times.
At all times.
And then we like complain that they cry. Of course they cry. You know how terrifying that would be? Like that is terrifying. So it's like of course they cry all the time because we're so used to it. They're not. But then it's like to just see them develop these things that we take for granted on a regular basis and then to see them turn into little humans and have personalities and have
Hmm.
opinions and like cognitive thinking where they're like problem solving. And like,
Yeah.
I think it's just, I cannot wait. I think it's going to be such like, it's like the ultimate reality TV show that like you get a front row seat
Uh,
to all of it.
yeah. I'm at a fun age, like I'm about 11,
Oh
where
yeah.
your child is like a person.
They're a
They have very
person.
strong opinions about things, but they're also incredibly naive at the same time.
Right.
And they're starting to
Yeah.
look like an adult a little bit. It's wild.
Mhm.
It's
But
wild.
my niece is 11
Yeah. It's wild. It's
and
funny, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And like this weekend, she was talking about, I don't know why this came up, but we were talking about like all gender bathrooms. Grandma brought it up. I was like, "Oh, this is not something we should be talking about." But grandma brought it up
Okay.
and she had a lot of opinions on the subject.
Yeah.
And I was happy to see they aligned with my opinions, but no, but it was interesting because it's like it's this hotly debated for
Yeah.
whatever reason topic.
Right.
Um, and this little 11-year-old was very much in the conversation
Mhm.
and and is actually experiencing it firsthand because
Yes.
schools are having to make
That's
decisions and
right.
things,
That's right.
right? So, or like my nephew who's 8 was asking me, he's like, "Can only girls have babies?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well," I'm like, in today's world, that's actually a more complicated question than
Yeah.
like it used to
Yeah.
be.
Right.
And so I was like, how do I like explain this to an 8-year-old without, like with it being 8-year-old appropriate? And I was like, well, you need certain parts to have a
Yeah.
baby.
Of course.
You may not consider yourself a female or a male, or you may consider yourself either, but you do need some physical organs
Yeah.
in order to have a like birth a baby. And he's like, "Oh, so you mean like when people are confused about what gender they are?" And I'm like,
I love that they're having this conversation. It's great.
I'm like, sure. Like, well, you know what? We'll leave it
Sure.
at that for now. Like, I'm not gonna, because I also was like, I don't know what how your parents feel about the
Sure.
subject, so I'm not
Yeah.
trying to like put my opinions on it. But I was like, yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
sure. I was like, but so, you know, but you need the facts are, and I feel like that's what I'm starting to lean into because these kids, they have so much, they know so much more than we think they
They
do.
do. They do.
And so I just like lean into the facts and then like let them kind of make their opinions from there.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun for you. It's just gonna be
Yeah.
fun. Like my daughter's like been a massive drag queen fan since she was like 2 or 3 years old.
I
Like
mean, who isn't?
obsessed, like obsessed with drag
Did she
queens.
watch RuPaul's Drag
Oh
Race?
yeah, all this stuff. And I just think it's amazing. I just think it's fun.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious, but she's like so into it. It's not
I
like
love it.
we were pushing it here or there. She's just like totally into it. I just want to, I just want to be a supportive parent, encouraging,
100%.
it's your life. It's not my life, really. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
guiding you and trying, first of all, in the beginning, you're trying to keep your kid from killing himself, him or
Right.
herself.
Just keep them
They're always
alive.
touching everything and they have
Yeah.
no like survival instinct, zero.
Right.
You're like, okay, I'm just trying to keep you alive. And then
Yeah.
after that kicks in. It's just you're guiding the ship, it's kind of
Yeah. You're just like, just figure it
here we
out.
go. Ask
Uh,
questions, like
I think like the funniest question I ever got, actually 5-year-old from my other niece, 5-year-old, we were coloring, nothing special. She goes, "Aunt Jen, how come some boys like boys?"
yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how that just came up while like we're literally coloring like Barbie doll
That's how
things or
they
like
think
My
though,
Little
Jennifer.
Pony.
It's how they
But I'm
think.
like, and it's at 5 years
Hmm.
old. And I was like, well, and then I was like, I think my answer was, I was like, well, God makes everybody different.
Hmm.
And just like some boys like boys, some girls like girls, and some girls like boys.
Yeah.
And then she was like, was in my mind, I was like, please do not ask me to elaborate and do not ask me other questions. And then she was like, okay, and like went
Yeah.
back to coloring, and I was like, all right, pass that one. And
Pass
it's
it.
like that's I think gonna be the tough part. Like what's the craziest question that like your kid has asked you?
It's crazy. Like, I think a lot of that stuff, like sex-based questions, is like the biggest. And they ask like 5-year-old super early, gender-based questions. I remember
Because
one
they
time,
see it and
yeah,
they
they
don't
see it.
understand it.
My daughter goes, she goes, Dad, do you and mom have sex? And I'm like, yeah, we do. And she goes, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, it's just like, you look forward to
You're
that.
like,
Okay.
that's also why you're here.
Yeah, I'm like, do we? Yeah, it does. Yes, we do. She's like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, I didn't think so, but wow. It's like, why do you not think? Like, we're very open. I'm like, yeah, well, let's
Yeah.
talk about it. Let's, you know.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think what's interesting is like, if like we're so worried about like what other people are teaching our kids and stuff like that, but like the kids want to know. Like they want to know
Right.
early,
They're
like
gonna
crazy.
ask.
They're gonna ask. You cannot escape it. And they're all pivotal points in their life. Your
Right.
answer is going to create a ricochet. It's going to
Right.
create an imprint on them of what they think it is. So it's
Right.
like no pressure. It's like,
Yeah, I know, right?
it's
Like
like, you know,
like you're either gonna raise like an a-hole
yeah,
or someone that's
exactly.
good.
Can
Yeah,
you
I mean,
imagine? Some people are
it's
telling their kids crazy shit. Seriously,
oh,
crazy
I
shit.
know.
Like,
I know, because we've already also had the conversation about like, okay, things that we will not allow our family members to say in front of our children. So there will be some boundaries set on
there's
that
a
element
list.
as well. There's a list. It is well defined, and things that I have heard come out of their mouths. So, yeah, it's definitely like for example, I bought we're definitely in the new parent stage where we buy things that we won't need anytime soon just because they're cute, right? So we were in the store and I saw this, and they didn't have this when we were kids. They had this little crayon thing. It has 18 crayons and it is purely skin tones.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love this. Like this is so smart. I wish we had this when I was a kid. And really for us, like my husband's Colombian, I'm obviously not. We don't, we don't know what if she's I immediately thought ahead. I'm like, if she draws a picture of our family, she is going to need a variety of colors, right? And this is such a great like learning tool, right? Where if she uses this, then she can ask like, why are there 18 colors? And
Yeah.
then you're like, well, there's a lot of different skin tones and all skin tones are beautiful. And right, like that's just like a perfect
It's great.
learning moment. So I was so excited. I bought this $12 thing of 18 crayons, which is like ridiculous. But I bought it. So I'm explaining it to my boomer parent,
It's great.
and she's like, why do you need that? And I was like, well, and I told her exactly what I just said. I was like, it's so great, like, blah, blah. And she's like, well, that doesn't make sense. She's like, you're supposed to tell them that you don't see color. And I was like,
Oh
no, that
no.
was like the 90s. That's what we were told. I was like, but we've moved past that now.
Yes.
And now we do and we celebrate them. And it was just disconnect of like
Yeah.
I not computing like in her brain of like why that matters. And it's like and there's so many people that are still teaching their kids that,
Exactly.
or God forbid worse. Um and so it's definitely, yeah, like thinking about how do I not force my views and let them create their own, but how do I also make sure I don't raise a jerk?
It's always the worry.
Yeah, like
It's like,
'cause we've all met those people, and I'm like, "How do I
right.
avoid my kid turning out like bad?"
You're right. You know it when you see it, you're like, oh no, something
You're like,
happened.
"Oh,
It was bad.
something happened."
And you look at the
Yeah,
parents, you're like,
like
that was it. Like,
If that was my kid, I would be so embarrassed. Like, how do I not make that mistake? And it could be like just crappy beliefs, or they're just like rude, or they're
yeah.
like, I mean, there's so many things, and you like see them and you're like, how do I not raise an asshole?
Yeah. You know, the
Like a
rudeness part,
healthy person.
the rudeness part is a big thing because I see a lot of parents who like don't correct their children or tell them, hey, this is how you act in this place, or say please and thank you. A lot of people actually don't do that with their kids anymore. It's really
That's
bad,
really weird.
actually. So then you wonder why they're not courteous to people
Yeah.
and insensitive to things, you know? Like, it starts with
Yeah.
you. You are literally, think about it this way. If an alien landed on Earth and they knew
Right.
nothing of our planet,
They're like, what
it's
do I do?
basically like a baby. What is this? What
Exactly.
is this? What is this design? How does this, they'd have questions. Your child is like they came from another planet in your womb into this planet.
Yep.
They're like, how does this work? And then
Yeah.
somebody
And like,
tells
I
them,
need you to tell me
tell
how it
me,
works.
how does this work?
Yeah. And you're right. It's like, and it's everything. And yeah, it drives me crazy when people
Yeah.
don't teach them stuff like that, because you're like, because then it's so obvious.
It's
It's so obvious.
obvious. It's so
And you're just like, well, or I think even worse, when they teach them it, but then they don't actually do it themselves. And I
right.
think that
Yeah.
that's also the big, you know, that's also another just massive problem, because
Yeah.
it's like your kid is smarter than that. Like,
Way
you can
smarter.
say it all you want, but if you're not practicing what you preach, then what you're saying is going to go in one ear and out the other,
Yeah.
as it should, because they're also looking, they're watching you when you don't know.
Oh yeah.
They are paying attention to everything, and like, you need to lead by example.
Completely. It's a huge thing. I just think the magnitude of it. See, that's my whole thing with like, for us personally, with just having one child, is like the magnitude of this was overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
And I just honestly I just don't want to go back to it again. That's the honest
Right.
truth. I'm fairly selfish about it. My wife is too. It's like I has other things I wanted to do. And I know if I went
Yeah.
down this road several times, I'm gonna sacrifice other things.
Yeah.
And I know I can give energy for this one. I know I could do, but I refuse to
Exactly.
be in a situation where one child raises another child. That happens all the time.
Right.
That's bullshit, by the way, complete
Yeah,
horseshit.
it
And
is.
you're not doing your kid any favor by doing that
Mm-mm.
to them. It's just, oh, just let the other ones do it. Like, really? Do you want to be an indentured servant? I mean, like, what do you think this is? Like, they don't have a
No, I
choice in it.
totally agree.
like,
I think that the just pure responsibility
oh,
of parenthood, I think 9 times out of 10 is not something people take as seriously as they should.
right.
And, you know, to me, when I say like we only want one kid, and it sounds like you feel the same way, it's like that's me being
It's
responsible, because
responsibility.
I know that this is a massive undertaking. Like, you can have a spoiled jerk dog, and it's not going to be that like, we have a very spoiled French bulldog.
Yeah.
She's a pain in my ass. But like, what's she going to do? Like, who's she really impacting, right? Like, there's no expectations for her to like contribute to society, right? Like, she's fine. She's
no.
going to the dog park, and maybe she doesn't want to play that day with other dogs. Who cares? But like,
uh,
with humans, like, humans impact so much around them, that it is up to you, and that is a huge, and I totally agree with you. It's like so overwhelming. It's like exciting
yeah.
that I'm like, ooh, I can, like, I have the opportunity to create a good person
Yes.
that's going to like do good, and that's
Right.
going to like help right the sinking ship, it feels like right now.
Right.
And I'm also gonna have to explain why it's sinking. But
exactly.
like, I have that opportunity, and that is a huge responsibility. And yeah, doing that multiple times, it's like I do also still have goals in life, and I
That's what I'm
do
saying.
still
yeah.
have like other things that like, and if I, and by the way, if I ignore that, I probably actually won't raise the next one that well, right?
Yeah.
Like, because mentally I'm not gonna be at my best. right? So
Yeah.
it's like, I don't think that that's, but it goes back to, it's not about you, it's about the kid
Hmm.
now,
Yeah.
right? And that whole just mentality needs to change. It's actually not, because
Yeah.
we have whole generations that are raised by people like that, that put their that were really pressured to put the kid first above
Yeah.
themselves,
Right.
and I don't feel like that's worked out so well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's time to like change it up a little bit.
This is the real talk here. You're getting the real talk
The
about
real
this. So
talk. And
this
if
is the
you're in
real
your
talk.
20s or like early 30s having a kid, like I do think that's the benefit of having them older
Yeah.
a little bit, because you have like more formed
That's right.
yourself beforehand versus like changing with the kid.
Yeah.
That can get a little
It
dicey.
can be dicey. Yeah, for sure. But Jennifer, I got to tell you, this was incredible. I mean, I just love how you communicate how you feel about things. It's very direct, but it's also
Mhm.
kind at the same time. And it's good for people to hear that you could exist like that and not just
Yeah.
be a massive asshole and be direct,
Right.
or just be like passively aggressive, or just be hands off. You have
Yeah.
like a nice combination of all these things. It's
Thank you.
actually
I try.
beautiful. I think you're going to be a great
I
mom.
think I had to learn that.
Yeah. You're going to be a great mom. I feel it. I feel it.
That's my hope. We'll see. I guess we'll find out soon.
Well, the proof's going to be, it's going to happen. We're going to see.
Right.
So,
Right. The first person that calls my kid an asshole, we're gonna know that if I did a good job or
yeah,
not.
yeah. Wow. Please tell everyone how they could connect with your podcast and you in general, whole thing. Yeah.
Sure. So you can find me on my website is my almost midlife crisis. And then my that's obviously the podcast name as well. So you can find my almost midlife crisis pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. And then I'm also on social media under that handle on like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and
Yeah.
Instagram. So
Beautiful. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. I really
thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
Of course.